Living Proof New York Artist Edition number 2, available now. Forever Young and Crazy documents the life of OJ FYC, an iconic graffiti writer from the Upper West Side of Manhattan. As a New York City youth raised within the graffiti scene of an early New York with its crime, self discovery, drugs, fighting, joy, and violence. Forever Young and Crazy, a 138-page book, now available exclusively on our Patreon, shipped to our members for the month of October 2024. Coming from a troubled home, OJ was separated from his mom at age 4 and transferred from foster home to foster home, dealing with abuse at each one. Finding a sense of freedom and relief within graffiti, his approach to graph in sheer volume had him surpass many from his era. This book contains original writing from OJ regarding his relationship with JA1 Ecstasy, a tribute to the life of the late great Kes 5 YKK, OJ's bond with the legendary Andy Kessler, rest in peace, FYC crew history, as well as photos from the private collection that OJ has amassed over decades of graffiti writing. Forever Young and Crazy by OJ FYC, Living Proof Artist Edition number 2, patreon.com/livingproofnewyork.
Since a little bit after we last spoke, there's pretty much been one project that's dominated all of my time, the majority of it, and it's my first outdoor sculpture, and it's uh, just kind of a monster of a project in every way. Somewhat because I've never done anything like that before. I do a lot of work that's three-dimensional, but it's usually like, the spray can scrolls or a wall relief. This is a full in the round sculpture, and it'll go to a foundry and get casted out of metal. So the entire process is really involved, and the pressure I feel for it is higher than I've felt for anything, but I'm really excited for how it's coming out. And one of the reasons I think I feel the pressure is, everything I've ever painted, every mural I've ever done, they're not going to last into the next century. This is going to be around for a while because of the materials. So it feels like a legacy piece to leave behind. And because it's a longer time frame, it subdivides into every stage of it has a little more intention, a little more thought. So I'm making it out of parts of cars that I salvaged from the junkyard, or from many junkyards, but it will go to a foundry and get cast in aluminum. So I picture it getting dredged up from the bottom of an ocean in like 3,000 years. Like, I think it would last that long.
Wow.
But it's taken a different turn. Like the original intention for me was for it to be just created out of found objects, but for the sake of longevity, the people commissioning it want it to last longer than that, which is amazing. So it's a little bit of a shift in what I'm used to, because I'm very like analog, lo-fi, kind of whatever I can do myself is what my art looks like. I don't never had like people helping me in production of anything before. But what's kind of cool is the casting process is not high technology. It's the same process that's been done since like the medieval times. They use a crucible and they melt down metal and they pour it. And the foundry that's doing it is amazing. And it looks like, a dirt floor and like whatever you would see it like the same as it would have been 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's really cool.
How does the longevity aspect of it change the way you come about it? Like knowing that it's going to be around for that long and thinking about it as a thing that has to do with legacy rather than, you know, other reasons for making anything. Um, how does that change the way that you go about it, and then also the pressure that you feel that you're mentioning?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we find things that are from the past, there's one sense in which they're eternal or universal, and we see some truth about humanity that's always existed, and we can relate to that and say, oh, look, people have been the same. These are the same emotions that are being expressed in this that we feel right now and today, or that I've personally felt, even though this person's been dead for thousands of years. So you want to have that. The other thing that I think when I see art is, wow, that really defined that time period. So almost the opposite. This is how that time period was completely different from the time period we live in. Look at the way people are dressed. Look at what people's beliefs are.
What
Look
they
at
value.
what they value. And what does this say about the mythology or the perception of what was happening at that time? So with my sculpture, you know, I fall in love with formats. So I love classical sculpture, just like I love painting, maybe more than I love painting. I like walking around something. I always loved, um, you know, in Philly, they have amazing public sculpture that's by actually the grandfather, I think, of Alexander Calder. Um, and at the Met, they have amazing sculptures. There's just something about composing in 3 dimensions that I love. And one of the recurring themes of sculpture throughout, I guess mostly throughout Western art history, is the equestrian sculpture, the guy on horseback. And that is what my sculpture is actually. It's a guy on horseback. And so I was looking at all the ones from the past, and they, you know, they go back to, I don't know how far, Greece, ancient Greece probably, or further, definitely further. But seeing the body language of the horse and the rider and the juxtaposition of those two things, and kind of picking my favorite ones and trying to say like, oh, you know, I like the gesture of this, I like the stance of it, and really going through them and thinking about my own art, which has this kind of medieval gothic-y feel to it. I started trying to figure out, you know, what's mine going to look like? How do I both pay homage to the format that I respect and make it unique and of today? And in that process, in my research, it was happening at the same time as COVID. The Black Lives Matter movement was going on, and so I had, on top of the, you know, Google image searches that I was doing, and, you know, I say research, it's really just me Googling things. I was also being hit with current events
Yeah.
and had all that input simultaneously coming into my head. And I don't know if you remember, but in America, a lot of the guys on horseback are nefarious motherfuckers. It's Civil War, like Confederate generals. I mean, even the European ones. These are like
Yeah.
conquistadors and Christopher Columbus, and
It's like Napoleon.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the victors of history who are, as we know, not always the most favorable people, both in their time and especially in retrospect.
Yeah.
So, what was interesting is seeing, at the same time I was looking at these things, in the South, people were throwing ratchet straps around the guys on horseback, putting them on their truck and yanking them off their pedestals. And that really stood out to me because I'm watching the videos of it and they're buckling. You know, these are hollow cast bronze, most of them. So when you do that, they just kind of almost implode on themselves. They just buckle and fall over. And then I'd replay those videos and watch it and think, yeah, leave it like that. Don't take, they take it and throw it in a river. But then who's that protecting? That's kind of erasing the history, which is something we need to remember. It's too important to allow it to be forgotten. That benefits those that live in the shadow of that oppression in victory. And I really loved it. I loved to see, I thought if they would just leave that there, that would be a perfect monument, because it shows that they're vulnerable, that those symbols are vulnerable for having been left in public and being against the public's collective consciousness.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I'm not the first person to do a modern adaptation of a guy on horseback. And I started becoming aware of that. So it's not just these old ones. There's other new artists that have done their own version of an equestrian statue. And an artist that I really love his work. I've loved his work for a while. His name's Kahendi Wiley. He did that Obama portrait with the ivy in the background, but most of his work is these Renaissance looking portraits of African Americans that kind of subvert the expectation of it being like a mid-century white person with the background of nobility in terms of the symbols of the backgrounds and the poses and things like that, wardrobe. So it was at Rockefeller Center, a guy on horseback, and it just looks like a guy on horseback. Like I'm looking at thumbnails, I never saw it in person. And you look at it and it's just a guy on a horse. But when you get up close, because it's bronze, you can't see anything, but it's a guy in Nikes, African American, baseball cap. And you're like, oh shit. Okay. So it's not what I thought it was gonna be from my pre-existing knowledge of guy on horseback statues. But there was something about it that the shock at the end didn't fully undo the initial impression. And I sat there and I thought about it. Why is that kind of, I don't want to call it a punchline to a joke, but the breaking of the expectation not completely undoing the expectation? And I went and I looked back at all of them. And I started to think, if you've ever been walking around and you see a cop on horseback, it's one of the most intimidating experiences. I've been to protests, and when the cops on horseback come, it's intimidating. And there's a certain element of totalitarianism that is embedded in the body language. It doesn't matter who the person on the horse is. It didn't matter to me that it wasn't what appeared to be an authoritarian figure on the horse or an oppressor. It felt like an oppressor from the body language of it, from the silhouette. And I thought about it. Maybe the horse represents nature. They talk about breaking a horse is the way that you tame it or domesticate it. And maybe the person represents mankind. And maybe every single horse statue represents mankind breaking nature and making it under his dominion. So we will rule over nature. It's one of the premises for the civilization we live in.
Yeah.
Is that we will control nature. This is the first time in this civilization that is not likely. And I think most people are becoming more understanding of the fact that that's not going to happen.
That what's not going to happen?
That we're not going to dominate nature.
Yeah.
Nature is going to fuck us up. We didn't realize that 50 years ago or 100 years ago. This is new. This is for us. The people that are alive today are coming to terms with this. We're going to lose that battle. If we think we're going to take some linear view of what progress means in which the elements no longer control us, it's not happening. So all this, I don't want to call it work, but thought went into it before I even started it, just to determine the position of how the rider is going to be on the horse so that I can take this format that I'm so attracted to and make it updated. So when people see it, it's both universal, but also you look at it and you see, oh, this is about today. So my sculpture, the guy's fallen off the horse. He's clearly not going to catch his balance. There's all types of subtlety in the symbolism of the Renaissance horse sculptures. One leg up means the rider was injured in battle. Two legs up of the horse. Two legs up means rider was killed in battle. Hand gestures mean different things. I got the horse on one leg and the dude falling off. So I felt the need to really, before I start this massive undertaking, get right these big parts.
Well, if it wasn't weird as fuck to applaud, I want to applaud right now because I know like the passion that is going into this, and I know the work that has been going into it. I know the time that's been going into it. Like the past few times I've seen you, this is your thing. It's
Yeah.
um like whenever I'm just chilling, I'm like, I don't know where Distort's at, but whatever the fuck he's doing, he's thinking about that piece and he's working on it, and that's gonna be somewhere in the back of his mind or in the forefront of his mind doing it. So it's amazing to hear all of this, and I straight up think that like they couldn't have picked a better person to do it, because when you look at your graffiti and when you look at your art and any of your paintings and your murals and just like pretty much anything that you make a piece of art with, or any like markings on a surface, for those people who don't think of graffiti as art, think of it more as like style writing, whatever. You come at it from a very unique angle of there is communication with the general public pretty much like every time, whether it be you're doing like a legitimate like virgin spot that you're choosing, you're just changing up your name to say something else that will make the could make like the common person think about something. You know, you do that. That's not too common within graffiti. um your murals, they do the same thing, and I know that you think about the placement of your murals and who's going to be walking by this and what message is it relaying to the public and how it's affecting the community that it's in, and a lot of thought goes into all the things you do. And it's it's surprising to me the level of this piece you're doing now, but at the same time it's like not surprising because I wouldn't expect it. I wouldn't expect your especially when you're thinking about your legacy, you know? Um just browsing on some of your work, and I see that a lot of it has to do with shit like civilization, and has to do with shit like how this civilization interacts with and compares and contrasts to other civilizations, where we are in terms of a species and in terms of a community and in terms of our collective consciousness of what we believe or don't believe, and what the shit essentially like what the shit that's happening around us says about who we are as people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your work has to do with that, and um, I can't imagine how much thought you've had to put in to doing this piece, because I know it means some shit. So you're not just gonna do a horse with a guy or whatever. I've never really thought too much about like a horse and a man, but thinking about it now, I'm like, that is a pretty like totalitarian, or like if not totalitarian, just like super like I conquered type of figure.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's fair to say that it is kind of like I could fully see how it could be like man breaking nature as the symbolism. Um, all that being said, like all the shit that you've researched into and all the stuff that you've learned about it, what are you trying to say um, with yours?
Well, in all the other ones, even when the horse is flaring up, the guy's on it. He's got it. There's ones where the horse is really off balance, and the guy always has this look like, "Yeah, I got this." And I want mine to be the opposite. We don't got it. And even the way they're displayed. There's they're I don't want to say always, but kind of always up on a pedestal. So there's this huge plinth, and then they're above it, and so you're already looking up at it.
Yeah.
So it's demanding that you revere it. And I have a pedestal for mine, but it's the ground swallowing it up. It's a huge fucking splash that the horse is making. So it's the opposite. Um, so I'm hoping that the same way when I looked at all those sculptures, I didn't register it with my thought that that's what's being said to me. It was felt in a way so deep and so ingrained that I wasn't even fully aware of it. That's what I want my sculpture to do. I don't want it to be something where people read some plaque and they're like, oh, I get it. I want you to feel it and not even be able to like put those words that I said to it. It's just the body language, the symbolism. And I think with art on a whole, it's so open ended, it's so subjective. There's no right or wrong with art. Now, that's cool, and it's also not cool. I've never been a sports fan, but I watch basketball sometimes and I'm like, damn, everybody on the court is good. That's not true in art. Science has its problems, but it's not just like what somebody said, oh, this is it. There's like review, there's some type of collectivism to the culture of it. We don't have that. It's good because it is freeing, but it's also a little bit of a downside. And the reason that I feel like it's a downside is because, I think things are changing for the better. But if you go back, well, at least for me in my childhood or my, young adulthood, telling people, especially people in graffiti, that I do art or that I'm into art, art was not something that people relate to. It was like weird.
Yeah.
You're a weirdo. And the reason that that perception was so common and is still pretty common is because you go to a gallery, you go to a museum, and I study art. I mean, I'm a fan of it. I went to art school. I'm not like an outsider to it. I see a lot of shit that I don't get. I don't understand it. So I can relate to why people are alienated by it and think, what the fuck is that? Or my kid could do that, or I don't get it. Because I don't get it. And then I feel stupid and I'm like, oh God, this is probably some brilliant thing and I just don't understand it. And then I remember, that's not good communication.
Yeah.
That's not, I think I'm really lucky to get to do this. It's not the hardest job in the world. You got to make it look cool and it's got to communicate something. And that's it. Other people have jobs where they build something and it has to function. You design a car. I mean, think of how many factors go into everything. If you're an electrician, if you're a plumber, all we're dealing with is aesthetics and meaning, aesthetics and symbolism. I mean, that's my opinion, but
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
if you fall short of that, the fuck are you doing? This ain't rocket science. Make it look cool, make it mean something. And I kind of see how things got off course. Well, I don't want to say off course because now we have every option. Anything you do, I think the limit has been pushed all the way to the edge. So you could almost do anything and say, well, that's art. I mean, there's performance art. I'm not saying it's not art, but it's theater.
Yeah.
It's not really the same as the tradition of visual art.
When you look at some of the old artworks at like the Metropolitan, it's a fucking breathtaking shit. That you're just like, how the fuck did they do that
Yeah.
with limited, or what we think of as limited technologies and like methods? And this thing looks like a like how could someone do that with their hands?
How are they carving that shit out of marble?
Yeah.
The Pietà, I mean, every Bernini statue, every Michelangelo statue, you hard pressed to find someone alive right now that can fuck with that. It is just so insane.
And also the sourcing of the materials.
Yeah.
Like pigments that you'd have to source in some crazy way. You're not going to go to Blick and just
Right.
get whatever you want.
Yeah. There's a lot of integrity behind every stage of it. Now, the downside for them was it's all commissioned by the church. It's all restricted in terms of the content, right? So they might be looking at what's happening now and thinking, well, you guys are lucky because if we made something that went against our patron, which was just the church for most of the Renaissance, you're not going to survive.
So the church funded or decided what art was being made for the most part.
I think so. I'm not positive, but I think for the most part. And every culture, it's not just Western culture, you know, if you look back, there's traditions of art all over the world, but they're pretty narrow in terms of the aesthetic. So you look at Japanese prints, there's a cohesion to them. I mean, way more cohesion than what we have.
We meaning current modern day America.
Modern art.
Okay,
Yeah, modern art, it's like what's important is that you don't look like anything that someone did.
1 second. Just want to make sure of something. You were saying modern art is important that you don't look like something that someone else did.
Yeah, I mean
And so there's less cohesion.
we put an emphasis on novelty.
Yeah.
I think it's getting less now. I think we're starting to see that the definition of art is so broad and can be anything that artists are trying to find the middle again. And it's different because now we're finding the middle of a much wider circle. So everybody's middle is a little bit different. Depends on your influences, depends on what you value. But I think there's a lot of people that they want their art to look like art as fuck, like the epitome of art right in the fucking middle of the target.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good use of all of this expansion that happened with modern art, where it became, you know, it started with there's all these restrictive traditions. Then you have like Impressionism, where Japanese prints are coming from Europe, influencing European art. That's like, you know, I guess like Van Gogh and that whole school. And then you have Picasso, and Picasso is taking art from Africa. And he's, I don't want to say like appropriating it, but inspired by it, maybe appropriating it, using the African masks and creating a style that is a convergence of this is Western art, this is African art, and I'm going to make something new out of these two things. That's really dope too, when you can take two styles and blend them. And then you cut to America. And this is very typical America to me, that they see all that going on, and the interpretation is, so you could just do anything. Oh, if he could do that, if he could do a bull out of a line, then, you know, Jackson Pollock is going to say, well, I'll just fucking splatter fucking paint that. There's a difference between that novelty, that I'm going to do something that's just how I feel and not in the continuation of any tradition, and things that are in the continuation of multiple traditions fusing into something new. Once that started, and I'm not saying it's bad, I like Jackson Pollock, but it started this whole postmodernism. There is no truth, everything is subjective, and everything fragments into just a billion pieces. And then what do we lose? We gain infinite possibilities. So when I sit down to make art, I can do anything I want, and the public will accept it. What you lose is some cohesion, and it's alienating, because when a regular person goes and looks at art and it's just fucking anything, it's kind of hard to get into it. When I put my Spotify on shuffle,
Yeah.
I have to skip a bunch, because even if I love that song, it's different from listening to an album. It kind of becomes disassociative.
Yeah. Do you think that that's a sign of, like we were saying in the beginning, that a lot of what art does is tell you about the people living in it? Do you think that's just a sign of where we're at as a human society? Your piece with the horse and the man, has the guy fallen off of it? You know what I mean? Like, we don't got this. Do you just mean that we don't got the conquering of nature, or like, is that more of like a statement also towards us as a society, where we're at with technology, where we're at with our beliefs, and where we're at with like the same way there might not be cohesion in the art, and it just might be like a little bit of like, we feel lost? Do you think that's just society in general?
Well, the larger critique beyond just the environmental one is the idea that we're making progress without understanding what is life.
Hmm.
What progress at what? If you don't understand the whole, you can't cut a line through it that gets you from A to B, because you don't have the map. You don't know where we're going. I think artistically, I wouldn't say we're lost. When I look at the art that resonates in terms of it's valued, people spend a lot of money on it, and it's at the top of the food chain in terms of museums, galleries, collectors, popularity, these kind of indicators that we have within our society, you can't dismiss that. I can't say, well, I don't agree with that. What I can do is look at what that symbolizes and what it's resonating with, and say, okay, this must exemplify where we're at, more so than whatever the fuck I'm doing. A good example would be, I mean, I hate to bring it up, but this was like years ago. The last time I was at Art Basel before last year was with the banana. Do you remember this banana duct taped to a wall?
Yeah.
And it sold for like some psychotic amount of money. And it became this kind of symbol for artists of like, look how fucked the art market is. What is that? But let's think about it. What is that? What what was going fuck what's going through the artist's head. I don't even care to think about that. Let's talk about what's going through the head of the person buying that thing. Because the person buying it is the one giving it value. If that never sold for the amount of money it sold for, I don't remember what the number was, but it was high. If that didn't sell for that much money, nobody would be talking about it. It wasn't the artist that validated it. It was the person purchasing it. So why did that resonate with the man that purchased that? I believe that at this day and age, many of the people that have consolidated the wealth, you know, through banking and whatever, I don't know how people do it. There's fewer and fewer people controlling more and more of the money and resources of the world. It's all getting consolidated and pooled into fewer and fewer hands. Maybe in slow motion, but it's happening. I think if you were to talk to those people, I think they realize that they don't have some skill set that other people don't have. They know this is a fluke. I arbitrarily got seated in a position where I can manipulate things to have value and other people cannot. That man looking at a banana duct taped to a wall says, this guy gets it. He understands that it's all bullshit and something will be worth a lot of money because I say it is, or because of some random shit that happened. Because that's how that dude feels. That That piece resonated with the dude that bought it.
Mm.
I'm not the biggest fan of some of the bigger name artists that use a lot of, what would you say, that outsource their production. They have tons of assistants working on their shit. Their hand isn't in anything. It's not a coincidence that many of the famous artists work in a style that's graphic, cartoony, posterized, vectorized. It's because you can't, there's no difference between what they had their hand in and what they didn't. It's all the same. It's all handless. It's all mass produced. That resonates with our society.
Yeah.
We'd say, hey, a big gallery is going to say, hey, fuck some dude that's making 20 paintings a year. I'm not signing them. I'm signing someone that can crank them the fuck out. And who can crank them out? An assembly line, a production team. It's all supposed to be in reference to pop art. Andy Warhol did pop art ironically to critique this shit. The pop art being made now is not ironic. It's not a critique. It's a full-on endorsement of commercialization, all these things that have removed us from quality.
I think that we just need to slow down when I hear all of this, and just being alive and feeling it. I feel like we need to slow the fuck down, and like you're saying, think about what exactly is progress, like progress in what direction. I think I was listening to um like a Lex Friedman podcast. I don't know which one, but him or the guest that he had on were kind of saying like we don't actually know if what we're doing is good, because like we're seeing it from like a couple years perspective. If you zoom out like super far and wide, this might just be leading into some insane catastrophe. And one thing that I think about is that like, and this is like kind of off topic but not really, is like the idea of like community and what that does to a human being. It's super healthy for a human being. When I say community, I kind of just mean like being around your loved ones
Mm-hmm.
and being around like friends and family and laughing, like super um foundational basic human things to have that we don't have, or that we have less of. Like my family is pretty much all of them like it's from Ecuador, and the other one's from China. But the ones from Ecuador, like they have a super poor country, super dangerous country right now. But what they have in abundance that we here lack is they're always together, and they're always like laughing, and they're always like kind of feeling human. And like a few weeks ago I went on a trip with just me and like two or three of like my good homies. And before I left on the trip, I was extremely stressed out because of like some, like you're saying, straight up like made up bullshit, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But in my brain, because I'm living in this world of cyclical made up bullshit, I'm like, this is the real shit. And if I don't solve this, I'm going to fucking sink badly. I go there, I spend like just like 1 week, not even a crazy amount of time, with the homies just laughing as if like I'm like 16 again or whatever, like carefree. And all those problems disappeared.
Yeah.
And it makes you think like, dude, what even is progress? Because like you could say that like vacation and having fun with your homies is a waste of time, but like that shit felt mentally and mental health wise and spiritually speaking and emotionally speaking, mad fucking progress.
Yeah.
And it's like the microwave society of wanting something fast. I'm not crazy into art, but just from like my immediate like intuitive response is like, I think that something, a piece that was handmade, has more value than one that was assembly lined. Whether people have other opinions, like it's totally chill, you know what I mean? And I'm sure that there's philosophies from every angle, but just it's like if I buy a cup made at fucking Walmart by like, there's a million cups like it, then I go to a store and there's some like Japanese molded fucking cup.
Mm-hmm.
My brain immediately says this one's worth more for, I could feel it, like I can
Mm-hmm.
touch it and feel it, and it just feels different, and there's something different about it.
It's about connection.
Yeah.
Connection to the person that made it, like you have connection to your friends, and how meaningful that is.
Yeah. And it's like when it comes to art, there's like a lot of AI generated art now, and there's just different mediums and everything's accepted. Do you think that's you're like sort of gave an answer, but do you think that's cool? Do you think that's fine, or do you think more so on the lines of with science, with math? Because someone could argue like art isn't science or math, but at the same time, it is good to have some sort of like, I guess, guideline. There's definitely two extremes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the depth of the connection is a good way to gauge it. And what's really hard is to simultaneously affect a lot of people and affect them deeply. Most of the time, if I do something and it doesn't become, it's not that a million people see it. That's not the success that I've gotten to enjoy. The success I've gotten to enjoy is one or two people emotionally brought to tears or just moved in a way where it makes it all worth it. I always think of like if you were icing a cake, you can only kind of drag it across the surface with them. That would be like having mass appeal, like a pop musician. Well, maybe that's a bad example, but you could have mass appeal and really just kind of affect people on the surface. There's a million really amazing artists that nobody knows about, but it's not that they're failing. They're affecting people in their immediate surrounding and probably in a deeper and more personal way.
Yeah, I think that also true passion and true passion for what you do and purpose driving what you do, and purpose that kind of comes from within rather than like maybe how much bread am I going to get from it, which is also important as another aspect, but like that legacy wise and history wise will probably outlast. Like I was at the museum with my homie just to go, and there was like a Claude Monet exhibition, and I was just sitting there, and the amount of people coming in and out of there, and for some reason, like my friend writes graffiti, so we were talking about it like from a graffiti aspect, and I'm like, dude, Claude Monet has long lasting, for real ups. Like
Discover
he did, like he doesn't have to put it everywhere for you to see it. They're gonna put it one place, and then the whole world's gonna come and see it, and the whole world's coming to see it because it mattered. You know what I mean? It
yeah.
mattered, and like I think something mattering like that really has to be intertwined with. It's more of like a long term approach. A lot of famous people in general, like a lot of legendary people in general, aren't even given their credit while they're alive.
There's a photographer. Oh, I'm gonna forget her name. I went with my mom. There's a documentary about her. She passed away, and they found all these negatives, and they developed them. And she was not known in her time. And she has an exhibition in New York right now, and I went to see it. It was one of the dopest photo exhibitions I've ever seen in my life. All after her death, she never received recognition. I haven't watched the documentary, so I don't know all the details, but it was inspiring because I know a lot of people that just do this shit for the love of it. They do it to do it. It's real hard to do that and meet the demands of capitalism or of any form of being commodified where you have to exchange your services for some external value. It's a lot easier to do it in a vacuum because think of how many considerations are already going into the making of an image. There's so fucking many. I'm still doing commercial murals. And since I started the sculpture, I have a much harder time adjusting myself to the requests of other people artistically. So I worked regular ass day jobs for a very long time. And when I started being able to support myself off of my art, mostly through murals, because they're the most commercially viable, I was so happy to just be painting. I was like, oh, thank God. I'm not going back to a day job. I will do anything to just paint. So they could tell me paint the dumbest shit in the world, and I'd be like, all right, it's fine. I'm getting to paint, and I'm gonna get to. Everything was a challenge. Everything was some new problem solving thing to do, and I appreciated it. And now I don't feel that way. I feel really burdened because I'm aware of my mortality. I'm not going to be around forever. I really want to get the dopest shit that I can get off of my chest.
Yeah.
And it takes one tweak in the wrong direction for me to just want to throw out the whole fucking thing. I don't even want to do it because I'm balancing tons of considerations to put an image together. You throw one little wrench in it and it falls apart.
Yeah.
I had a teacher when I was in art school. I went to the Academy of Fine Art in Philly. He would always say, it's a harsh ass thing to say, but he would say a painting is as good as its weakest consideration, as its least most consideration. So whatever the weakest part of your shit, it doesn't mean weakest section of the painting. It could be a consideration. The color palette is a consideration. The composition is a consideration. It's as good as the worst part. That's true.
How do you balance that? How do you balance having to meet the demands of capitalism?
Um, well, that's why the sculpture matters so much to me because they've really allowed me to do kind of a cornerstone of what I believe in and funded it. And so it alleviated all that pressure.
Mm.
And I've gotten to enjoy a couple years of just being devoted and focused and doing other stuff on the side, but not with the same, it's not competing with me creating my vision. And all the projects I have planned for after this in the future, I'm excited about them. I feel like I refound my center. And now when I go on tangents for money, it feels like a tangent I'm going on for money. It doesn't feel like I'm getting swept in a direction. That's how it used to feel. Oh, now I'm just going to end up going down this road of doing commercial murals.
Which you
And then
didn't
my
want to
art,
do.
yeah, and then my art will be these commercial ass murals. I've seen a lot of people become successful commercially. Who knows what kind of art they would be making? It's kind of a loss. We need patrons that will, and grants do it. A good gallery will do it for you, but not everybody has access to that. It's not guaranteed. It's a struggle. But whatever you can do to get creative freedom, that's worth a lot. I'll take L's all day on money when I have creative freedom. If I don't have creative freedom, turning the price up because I'm trying to steer the sails so I go in the direction of where my art needs to be going.
So at this point in your life, you're really aiming towards your center, your core, who you actually are, and the vision that you actually have, rather than just making money. Which, although important, um, you're aware of, like you said, your mortality. You're aware of all of these things, so you're trying to make it happen in a way that just has true, long-lasting value, not just to yourself, but to this like world in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even a good way to make money when you to go if you're trying to go to what is in demand and what people want, they think they want because they've seen it before. That's the direction you're running into the crowd. You don't have job security. Job security is when you have a niche, when you're an individual. The more you have some generalized, like if I become a landscape painter because people want to buy landscape paintings, that might sound like a good move financially. But now I'm just in the pool with everybody that does landscape paintings. And I don't really have the uniqueness that I would associate with what I would call job security. Like that if you want a this, you have to go to me because I'm the only guy that does that like that.
Why did you decide to make it out of cars, or like getting the metal from cars? How, from the materials to from cars, how did that all come to be?
I have a lot of this kind of armored um, aesthetic in my work. It's in the I do these I engrave car hoods, paint and engrave car hoods. They don't go on cars; they go on the wall, and I call them shields. I make the scrolls out of the spray cans and the fire extinguishers. There's this like medieval battle shit that I have, and the reason that I have that is because it's a it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of this classicism that represents symbolically art at a high point, which I like to try and like use as a, an, a tool to gain credibility to the images. And then it also has this like black bloc protester vibe to it. So when I was in high school, it was the Iraq War, Afghanistan War in New York. There were all these protests. I would go and just be regular, marching with regular people. But there was people in the front that had the bandanas on. They put vinegar on their bandanas so they wouldn't get tear gas. I looked at those dudes and I was like, damn. Those are the dudes that were at like the World Trade Organization and all that shit. And this was at a different time. This is when the left was preoccupied with class struggle, with economic injustice. That's so not the case now. But that aesthetic, that really stood out to me. So the shields, the car parts, these are like what I picture some post-apocalyptic street protesters making armor for themselves out of it. And it's from the garbage of our discarded industrialized civilization.